Hey, Daddy, this is the man of the champions, Bill Fonzie Alfonso, giving a shout-out to...
Something else.
Something else, Daddy.
This is Nickel Matara, Great Warrior Wolf, and you are listening to Something Else.
I'm Tony Cini, and you're listening to Something Else.
Hey everybody, it's Rich Palladino, the voice of New England, and you are listening to Something Else with Arya.
And welcome to episode number 095 of Something Else. Feast your ear holes on this week's episode as we take a look at both Mid-South Wrestling and World Class Championship Wrestling from 41 years and 1 day ago, May 28th, 1983. My name is Arya, and welcome to the show. And because we didn't scare him away after week number 1, welcome back, the co-host with the co-most, it's Trae.
What can I say? I'm a glutton for punishment.
And hey, you know, at least they got 2 mostly good shows to watch this week, so, you know, there's that.
Yeah, we were talking right before we started recording, and I think over the last, it's Monday as of recording this, over the last 3 days, I think I've watched something like 20 hours of wrestling.
That is tremendous. Over the last 3 days, well, I guess I just watched WrestleMania 13, but ignoring that, the only shows I've watched are the ones we're reviewing this week. So,
yeah, it was a little bit of an adjustment going from like 2024 state-of-the-art wrestling to Southern Territories from 1983.
yes, watching Best of Super Juniors and AEW Double or Nothing definitely is a lot different than Mid-South and World Class. There was no fire thrown on either show this week.
Nobody crashed a bus into anybody on these shows.
At least not that was aired on the show. It could have been like a deleted scene or something. So, we're approaching the 100th episode, and let's break out some big news. So, in 3 weeks, this show is on the move. We are moving back 1 day or ahead 1 day, however you want to look at it. We're moving to Tuesdays, people. Starting June 18th, this show, I keep wanting to say mid-class, Mid-South World Class show, is going to be on Tuesdays to make way for yet another new show here to my fabulous podcasting empire. June 19th and every Wednesday afterwards, I'm going to be joined by yet another new co-host. And we're going to be talking about NWA TNA. That's right, weekly pay-per-views from June 2002 on every Wednesday. And so it'll be a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday thing. And yes, odds are I will get tired of doing all this wrestling podcasting by the end of the 100 or so episodes of TNA we have. And the funny thing is, well, I guess it's not quite, but it'll actually, by the time we finish the TNA thing, we'll be down to like the last 30 or 40 Smoky Mountain episodes. So very quickly, I'll go from doing 3 shows a week to 1.
You'll just pick up another one after that.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure you'll say to me, hey, you know, we could do Memphis. And I'll be like, sure, why not? Or something to that effect. But, you know, before we get to TNA and the run of Stone Cold Jeff Jarrett, let's go into the Wayback Machine to May 28th, 1983, Mid-South Wrestling from the Irish McNeil Boys Club in Shreveport, Louisiana. Let's go to the intro with Boyd Pierce and Bill Watts. They're going to tell us about kind of a wacky series of matches, but there is a reason for some of the wackiness. Let's go to that right now.
And welcome to Mid-South Wrestling Television Network. I'm Boyd Pierce, and we have a lot of excitement for you. You're going to see tag team action at its very best as the popular Junkyard Dog takes as his partner Captain Redneck Dick Murdoch against the Oriental team of the Black Ninja and Yoshi Yatsu. Popular stars Tito Santana is here. Johnny Rich and Tim Horner are partners against Mr. Olympia and the Herald Russian Boris Zirkov. Tom Jones versus King Kong Bundy. All the stars are here, and a star to tell you about it Here's Cowboy Bill Watts. Bill.
Well, thank you, boy. It looks like a great night of action. But first of all, right the night before the Superdome, my kids were with me in New Orleans, and they were watching television, and they saw something very unusual. And I called Channel 26 WGNO down there, Dean Ward, the general manager and assistant vice president, and Paul Crimsier, the fine staff down there, and told them there were some kids that were talking about pro wrestling on TV. And they looked into their file, and there's a show they do down there called Impressions. And, you know, we're always talking about how popular Mid-South wrestling is in every market it's in. And they looked it up, and Willie Zanders does that show for them. And they were out to the schools talking to some of the youngsters about what did they see on TV that they liked. And we're going to share that with you because every one of these youngsters liked Mid-South wrestling, and they knew all the stars. And I think that's really touching and really great, and we want to thank them.
Okay, so today's big match is the Junkyard Dog and Dick Murdoch, of all people, versus Kendo Nagasaki and Yoshiatsu.
The Oriental team.
Yes. So, not, a random Dick Murdoch appearance is weird or anything. He was here last year and had a pretty decent run here, but it was so out of nowhere to hear Dick Murdoch randomly be announced as part of a tag team main event. And then, if that wasn't weird enough, in addition to the popular Tito Santana and the popular team of the Junkyard Dog and Dick Murdoch, because, poor Boyd Pierce needs to learn a new adjective, we are also going to have Tim Horner and Johnny Rich versus Mr. Olympia and not Ted DiBiase, but Boris Zerkov making his Mid-South debut. And then, in case that wasn't unusual enough, Watts then talks about something unusual. He says that his kids were watching TV the day before the Superdome show, and they saw something on TV that was weird. And that weird thing was kids talking about how much they like wrestling. This is 1983 or 2024. But, so he calls the TV station to ask him what the fuck is going on, and apparently it was a news story about what kids like. Now, I'm not going to play it, but they showed interviews with kids talking about wrestling. And apparently, like I said, Eric and Joel Watts were channel surfing and came across this random news story and felt that it was something unusual. These kids, I'll be honest, I was on TV when I was a kid, and I sure as hell was awkward, but I at least wanted to be there. These kids look like they want to be anywhere but sitting where they were with a camera in their face, being asked about wrestling. And yeah.
I think whenever they find people to represent the wrestling fandom, they never find the best of us.
No, they really don't. And unfortunately, the wrestling companies themselves sometimes do a great job at finding the worst of us to put on TV as representations of wrestling fans. Yeah. So from here, and this is one of those times where it's like, why did Watts veer off in this conversation about the story? Because, like, that story they could have plugged, at the end of the show before the expiration of time match and stuck it in there, because we randomly get this break to talk about kids liking wrestling, to come back to the breaking news of Ted DiBiase has allegedly broken his right hand. Now,
allegedly.
Yes. Now, I'm not sure. I'm sure we'll find out as the weeks and months go by whether or not DiBiase actually broke his hand or not. It's very possible he did, but at the same time, he's a heel. So lying, of course, is a big thing that heels like to do. And it certainly seems like a way to get out of a match with Jim Duggan if you suddenly have a broken body part. But so we go to a horrible press conference because the only member of the press is Reeser Bowden. And we're going to have a press conference here with Ted DiBiase, Mr. Olympia, General Skandor Akbar, and a bald Russian. Let's go to that right now.
Just before the taping of our television program, General Skandor Akbar, as you might suspect, has demanded a press conference. Now, I don't know what this is all about, but as you can see, I have with me General Skandor Akbar, Ted DiBiase, Mr. Olympia, and a gentleman from Russia whom I do not know.
That's why we're here. We want to introduce Boris Zerkov, one of Russia's greatest heavyweight stars, and he is tenacious, Reeser. I thought by now, Teddy, that Mid-South would put an end to this Duggan committee. This man is a menace to society, not only a dastardly attack on myself, But tell them what happened, Teddy.
Well, obviously, people, you can see by the cast of my hand that I am unable to wrestle. Well, you've already seen Duggan splinter a 2x4 on my back. But what you didn't see was this man attack me in a parking lot with a tire tool and break my right hand, so I'm unable to wrestle. And being that I'm unable to wrestle, I can't defend the Mid-South Tag Team titles with my partner. So I know that Mid-South is sitting by drooling because of the stipulation that we must defend the titles at least once in a 30-day period or forfeit the titles. So they're standing by waiting for us to forfeit the titles. But due to the ingenuity and the money and power and influence of the General Skandar Akbar, he has brought this man, Boris Zurkov, from Russia, and I am giving him power of attorney to take my place in all tag team title matches. That means, Mid-South, if you want to book a tag team title match, go right ahead, because this man will be there to fulfill that commitment.
We do have a title defense in 2 weeks with Murdoch and the Junkyard Dog.
Murdoch and Junkyard Dog, and we've got 2 weeks to fine-tune this machine.
Well, that says it all. So watch for him in 2 weeks. You'll see a championship bout.
Okay, so at my shoot job, I have to work with powers of attorney all the time. And I got to tell you, I've never heard of a power of attorney needed to defend the tag team championship.
Why didn't they simply incorporate the tag team?
Well, you see, that's a 1993 booking crutch. In 1983, we just have a power of attorney. I wonder how legal it is, because apparently, and I didn't know this until a few years ago when I was attempted to be forced into such a thing. Apparently, an actual medical power of attorney requires very little court action in general. You just sign a paper saying so-and-so is your power of attorney, and technically, they're it whether they want to be or not. And as weird as that sounds, I can speak from experience. I literally had to write a letter saying that I refused to be a power of attorney and get it notarized in order to be taken off.
So it's harder to refuse to be the power of attorney than to give someone power of attorney.
Yes. Yes, it
Weird.
is. So I wonder how that'll come into play. Maybe Boris Zurkov and Mr. Olympia end up being like the greatest tag team you've never heard of. And they're still greatest tag team champions that they end up feuding with DiBiase, because DiBiase's like, hey, motherfucker, that's my tag team title. And Boris is like, hey, motherfucker, you gave it to me. You gave me your power of attorney. So.
I did not know where this was going.
Spoiler alert, that is not where this is going.
Oh.
No,
just because I'm looking at it, I'm sorry, finish.
No, go ahead. I was just going to move on.
Just because I'm looking at it, would you like to guess Boris Yukov's cage match rating?
I know I looked it up just to double check to make sure it was the same person. So I should probably have a good guess at this. So I'm going to go with a 2.1.
3.73.
That is a lot higher than I would typically give him. Although, to be honest, I have not been a Boris Zukov historian. He may have had some very good matches.
I'm going to guess that's from Mid-Atlantic fans rating Private Jim Nelson.
Possibly. So, yeah, this is Boris Zukov of the Bolsheviks fame, if you're a WWF fan, or Private Nelson if you're a Mid-Atlantic fan. To be honest, I wasn't 100% sure it was him because he didn't have the beard. I had to look up to double check to make sure it was the same guy, because he's completely clean shaven. Now, of course, he does have the 83-pound head, so that probably should have tipped me off, but,
And see, I knew it was him because I'm like, that's a bald Jim Nelson.
That indeed it is, and this is, at least since we began watching this is our first Russian, or at least our first pushed Russian, because I think Volkov was here very, very briefly. But, he was gone. If he was here, he was gone quickly. But, yeah, so Private Nelson, Boris Zurkov, he's going to be here at least a little bit, Oh, and I guess they had, oh my God, I forget his name, but that guy whose leg didn't bend, but he has a backbreaker as a finisher, which was just hilarious. Korshenko. He comes back as Korshenko, but whatever. It doesn't really matter because I don't have to deal with him for like 3 more years on this show. But anyway.
Cold War tensions heating up here in 1983.
Yes, we're going to have Bill Watts getting geopolitical sooner rather than later. But so up first in the ring, it is tag team champion Mr. Olympia and our power of attorney tag team champion Boris Zherkov versus Ted DiBiase and General Skandor Akbar versus the popular duo of Tim Horner and Johnny Rich. So
Popular,
Horner,
you say?
Yes, very popular. As long as you never put a microphone up Horner's face, he's very popular. And Horner, fresh off his win over the Black Ninja last week, is back to being a jobber this week. And apparently, we find out here that Duggan has issues with all foreign wrestlers and not just Iranian/Iraqi wrestlers and managers. Also, in 2 weeks, as mentioned, Olympia and Zherkov take on Junkyard Dog and Dick Murdoch for the tag team titles. Zherkov, I'll say this, in the interest of fairness, I did not think he was the worst wrestler we've ever seen on these shows. Mind you, that's a pretty low bar because Larry Higgins set the bar absurdly low last year. But Zherkov did go over that bar, in my opinion.
He wasn't bad. Like, I've seen enough, like, Jim Nelson in Mid-Atlantic. He was fine, but then I've also seen the Bolsheviks, and he was the shits. So something happened.
It's funny because it's like Jim Duggan is far more than just a competent wrestler on the show. In fact, he's pretty damn good, when he's at his best. And you put him in the WWF, not so much. And
yeah,
I would say a lot of it has to do with, especially at that time, that schedule they were doing. You learn that you can get away with doing a lot less. And a lot of people, even those with good work ethics, it's like, okay, we can phone some shit in here and, people are still going to love it anyway. So I'm not saying Boris Zherkov was the next Ric Flair, but, it's the environment. We'll say that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go
ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay. The fans sadly got into Horner's comeback. Horner almost runs into the referee, Alfred Neely, when he runs off the ropes for a Thez press to Olympia. But Olympia wasn't the legal man, and Zherkov pinned him after a neck breaker and a middle rope knee drop.
Horner tried to do this like elaborate arm drag thing and lost his footing, and it looked very wonky. But he did hit a couple of nice looking drop kicks, so needed himself a little bit. Olympia and Horner were both wearing the exact same color of green trunks, and it bothered me because they were on opposite teams.
That would have been one hell of a team, Olympia and Horner.
Yeah. As always, I must note Carl Stern's favorite wrestler, Mr. Olympia.
At least it isn't Tim Horner.
Is Tim Horner anybody's favorite wrestler?
Tim Horner is Tim Horner's favorite wrestler, and you know what? That's not a bad thing to be your own favorite, I guess. But yeah, or that kid on Smoky Mountain from before you were watching this, who had the $3 foam lightning bolt, who told Paul Orndorff that his favorite wrestler was White Lightning. And so then we had Hacksaw Duggan versus Tony Zane. Reeser, I noted, was in no hurry to get out of the ring as Duggan stormed in to attack Zane. Duggan did an Irish whip, but Zane didn't run into the corner. Instead, he ran diagonally into the ropes near the corner and bounced back. He did take a great bump after a clothesline, and Duggan won with a spear.
I wrote Zane jumps Duggan as he's getting into the ring, and Duggan beats his ass. That was the totality of my notes.
Hey,
minute 31 seconds.
That's all you need, all right? All right. So up next is the start of how I termed the show, Whose Cheerios Did Butch Reed Piss In This Week? So the next match is scheduled as Junkyard Dog and Dick Murdoch versus the Black Ninja, Kendo Nagasaki, and Yoshiatsu with General Skandor Akbar. And that's not quite what happens here. Let's go to Reeser because Taboo Tuesday is about to break out.
As you can see, the Junkyard Dog is in the ring with me right now because the Junkyard Dog was scheduled to have as his partner for a tag team bout tonight. Captain Redneck Dick Murdoch. Now, this is very important because 2 weeks from now, whoever was to be Junkyard Dog's partner would also participate in a tag team title bout with the Junkyard Dog. Well, it turns out that for some reason or other, Dick Murdoch did not show up tonight. So we've decided that to be very democratic about everything, we're going to let the fans here help to choose a partner for the Junkyard Dog, not only for tonight's match, but also for the tag team title bout 2 weeks from now. So let's see who the first contestant will be to vie for that position as the Junkyard Dog's partner. And by the amount of applause of the audience here tonight, we will select a partner for the Junkyard Dog. And coming to the ring right now, let's hear an applause for Johnny Rich. Another very fine athlete coming to the ring right now, Tom Jones. And here comes a well-known man, Tito Santana. And Hacksaw Butch Reed. That's a good applause. But I believe that there is yet one more. And here he comes right now. You can hear it for yourself. Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Can there be any doubt about that applause? It looks like Hacksaw Duggan will be the partner of the Junkyard Dog. Not only in tonight's bout, but also 2 weeks from now for the Mid-South Tag Team titles.
So Reeser is now going ahead in time to steal the way that I say things, just to go back in time and make me look like I'm stealing from him. As for some reason or another, Dick Murdoch has no-showed the show tonight. And so now it's up to the fans to pick Junkyard Dog's brand new partner. And this man will not just be in this match, but also get a tag team title match, which, before I forget to mention this, I'd just like to point out that last week, the Von Erichs had to win a match to move up the rankings for the tag team titles. However, Junkyard Dog, first he was going to team with Dick Murdoch, who they've never teamed before, and now he's getting a title shot with just whomever the fans choose for him. This is like UFC booking at its worst. So our options are Johnny Rich, who just did a job, although Horner is the one that got pinned. Another very fine young athlete in Not That Tom Jones. Another well-known man in Tito Santana and Butch Reed, who gets no hyperbole. And one more, Hacksaw Duggan, who wins, shockingly enough. And so, go ahead.
Dick Murdoch, who by multiple accounts was a card-carrying member of the Ku Klux Klan, did not show up to team with the Junkyard Dog.
In the interest of fairness, he did, when he was here last year, he did team with African-American wrestlers, and, whether or not he necessarily wanted to in real life, he did. So, I mean, just want to throw that out there. But yeah, Murdoch, member of the KKK, allegedly, quote unquote,
allegedly, by multiple accounts.
Yes. Now, I do want to say that if this was 2024, well, maybe not, because nowadays we have at least one very good booker on one show and one decent enough booker on another. In at least 2022, if this would have happened, I'm like, oh yeah, we're burying the fuck out of Butch Reed. However, I will say this ahead of time before we even get to the rest of the show. there is a madness to the method. Bill Watts is not just, burying this poor bastard. Like, we buried Johnny Rich, although he didn't need much help to be buried, but, and not that Tom Jones, but yeah.
Rich and Jones got no reaction at all. Tito got a smattering of polite applause. Reed actually got cheered, but then they made sure to bring out the guy after Reed who was going to get more cheered.
I'll be honest, even though common sense said it was going to be Duggan before he came out, when they announced the Taboo Tuesday voting, I'm like, oh, it's going to be Butch Reed. Because they were a team last week and, yada, yada, yada. But nope. If this was Taboo Tuesday, Hacksaw Duggan was the street fight and Butch Reed was the verbal debate. While verbal debate got cheers from people like me, street fight was the winner. So we then get the actual match. It is Junkyard Dog and Hacksaw Jim Duggan versus the Black Ninja Ken Nagasaki and Yoshiatsu without General Skandor Akbar. Reeser was in a hurry to get out of the ring this time. And yes, in case this is the first time you've checked the show out, this is in fact the same Tola Yatsu who was pushed as a top heel in World Class. But he's not being pushed as the top heel here. He gets speared by Duggan quickly, and Duggan wins for the team. And then after the match, Duggan speared Nagasaki, and we only have one more week of the Black Ninja to go. Yay.
There was a meme that was going around Twitter this week that was, who are two people who matched each other's freak? And JYD and Hacksaw just immediately matching each other's energy. Perfect team.
Oh, yeah. It's funny because Mid-South, they have a tag team title, obviously. But there's never really a tag team division like that. Until later this year when the Midnight Express come in, it's like, the tag team titles are two singles wrestlers who are sometimes in a loose alliance. Sometimes it's like the Rat Pack where it's a little bit of a tighter alliance. But for the most part, it's just two random singles guys who were feuding with two other random singles guys who just happen to have the belts. And that's where we are right now.
As a longtime fan of Japanese wrestling, I'm completely fine with people being both active tag team and singles wrestlers at the same time.
Yes. Unfortunately, in 2024 in America, you're immediately thinking, well, tag team means jobbers to the stars. But, this is 1984 or 1983, where, the tag team titles were treated with respect, even in situations like this, where, again, not actual tag teams, but, it's still working here. So Tito Santana versus Rip Rogers. Now, I spent the weekend in Pennsylvania hanging out with my annoying brother and his wonderful children, and my brother, listening to me watch this match, made the prediction that referee Rick Ferreira would win this match. Spoiler alert, Rick Ferreira, despite being an enhancement talent on this show last year, did not win this match. Now, I did note that Tito was introduced from Mission, Texas, as opposed to the non-existent town of Tacula, Mexico, where he was introduced as for 20 years on WWF television, which, by the way, is not to be confused with Toluca, Mexico, which is the actual name of the city that somebody messed up many years ago and never got fixed. Let's see.
Funny, my wife was in the kitchen baking when I was watching this. She her job takes her all over Texas, and she immediately goes, "Oh, I've been to Mission, Texas. It's nice." So apparently, Mission, Texas, down in the Rio Grande Valley, and probably is actually where Tito is from.
More than likely, isn't he a high school teacher, or at least he was a high school teacher too?
Believe so, yes.
So I am not going to say what Bill Watts called Tito and Chavo Guerrero, but in 2024, he would be canceled for talking about the moisture on the back of Tito Santana.
Yeah, I made notes about that. That was actually in the other match, but yeah. This is a nice little match. Man, Tito was working. trying to show out, trying to get over, and Rip Rogers is good enough that Tito could like give him a little bit, so they actually had a little bit of a match. And then Tito won with a Gibson leg lock, which is one of those moves that will always pop me.
See, if you joined us like I think 1 week too late, because what's his name? Robert Fuller won with that on Smoky Mountain a few weeks ago.
Really?
Yeah. But by the
it
way,
was the Gibson leg lock, not to be confused with the Fuller leg lock.
Yeah, it was wacky, but hey, by the way, Watts calls Tito's opponent Rip Taylor at one point, and Rip Taylor was not in this match because he was too busy getting ready to be at Wayne Stock. But yep, he wins with the Gibson leg lock, and again, it's one of those things. Don't get used to Tito. He, is one of those people who are in and out. And honestly, I was kind of surprised he was here because I thought he was already in the middle of his, lifelong WWF run, but that is soon to come.
And oddly enough, not the last time we're going to talk about Rip Rogers this week.
No, it's not. It's amazing how much crossover these shows have, even though there's no actual crossover.
It's quite entertaining.
And then we have King Kong Bundy versus Not That Tom Jones. So it's good that Jones did not win the popular vote earlier tonight because he needed to save his strength to get his ass kicked, here by Bundy, who does a running bulldog of all things, and then wins with the Atlantic City Avalanche, which is the Oklahoma Stampede. And Watts says that Bundy is going after the North American title.
5 count, by the way, obviously.
So we've seen Bundy beat a lot of jobbers, and he beat Mr. Wrestling 2 a few weeks ago. And he is a fairly dominant heel here. However, there's somebody here who's been disrespected this week that is going to stand up because he wants a shot in the spotlight here. Let's go now to the ring where Butch Reed has stormed the ring.
Hacksaw Butch Reed in the ring, and he looks a little upset. He's called Reeser Bowden into the ring. Boyd, we were getting ready to go to our station break. Let's just wait a second here.
I want to tell you something. Down there at Mid-South Wrestling is one of the toughest wrestling promotions there is in the world. And you cannot be number one by sitting back in the background. The dog a while ago had to make a decision to go at Duggan because that's what the people wanted him to do. So I tell you this, it's a dog-eat-dog world out here, if you know what I mean. And so, in order for me, I don't come down here to Mid-South Wrestling to play second fiddle to nobody. So I'm going to the top, Risa. And in order for me to go to the top, I got to take on the best competition there is. I want Bundy back out here. You just seen him beat the brother Tom Jones. You just seen him beat Tom Jones. I want him to climb on this brother. Come on out here and face this brick house. Come on out here, Bundy. I want you.
Well, you certainly heard that challenge loud and clear. Hacksaw Butch Reed says that he wants King Kong Bundy, and he wants him right now. Well, I don't know whether King Kong Bundy is in the mood for another match.
This went a personal challenge to King Kong Bundy to show his mettle to come on out here and face me.
He wants Bundy to want him. And so Butch Reed manages to find a way to delay entire commercial breaks, because not only did we not go to a commercial break and instead of Butch Reed do a promo, we had an entire second match before we finally got in that before we finally got in that next commercial break, which, is very important for this company to make some money, to sell some ad time.
Well, they saved some money because Watts noted that they were not getting paid for this match.
Yes. So ultimately, who knows? They may have come out on top, or at least even here with that. But so we get our match. It's King Kong Bundy versus Butch Reed. Bundy hits the ring. Reed sent Bundy into the ropes, and Bundy ran over and snatched him in a bear hug. Like you said, Watts noted that they are fighting for free since they don't have a signed contract, which in my opinion makes them both idiots, but hey, that's on them. Reed came back with a pair of drop kicks and a shoulder tackle, which sent Bundy flying out of the ring. Bundy grabbed a chair, but Reed got it and cracked Bundy in the shoulder with it. Alfred Neely somehow got knocked down and didn't see it. He rolled in, he counts, and Bundy kicked out at 2? Okay, then, yeah. Bundy kicked out at 2. Reed does the middle rope shoulder tackle, but Reed's momentum sent him flying out of the ring. He rolls back in, and Bundy hits a big splash and a 5 count for what is essentially a clean victory, because he didn't break any rules except introduce the chair, but he didn't use the damn thing. And Reed, this is not the day to be Hacksaw Butch Reed. We must say that.
Yeah, I don't know. I read this as they're starting a program. I didn't read anything negative into it for Reed. I just thought this was starting a program and Reed has some adversity to overcome.
I could be wrong because, I don't know everything that ever happened. But I know Reed's days as a babyface are fewer rather than, and I fucked up. I don't know how to finish that sentence. But Reed is turning heel sooner rather than later here. So I don't think it's that, but I could be wrong. Maybe they feud for a month or so before, Reed actually turns heel, but I don't think so.
Yeah, but that also makes sense, though. The way to start the downfall. Yeah. I like watching Bundy. I like it when a big man sells like a big man. It's almost a lost art here in 2024.
And I think we talked about this last week. It's like, I know I don't want to constantly play the, modern day wrestling is this, modern day wrestling is that, whatever. But it's like, I miss the days of big wrestlers working like big wrestlers. It's like nowadays, everybody wrestles the same. And, no matter how spectacular these smaller people may be, watching, a 280, 300-pound man fly through the air and do crazy shit, that is going to be a million times more impressive than a smaller guy doing the same exact thing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just happy Satnam Singh hasn't learned to dive off the top rope yet.
Yeah.
It's possible that he has wanted to, but nobody has the guts to catch him yet. Although he doesn't wrestle that much, so who knows?
Wrestled twice last week.
Yes, I know he wrestled Bryan Danielson, and I know he didn't actually do a clean job, but he didn't actually beat Bryan Danielson, did he?
No, it was a DQ.
Yeah.
And then on Collision, they did Danielson and FTR against Satnam, Jay Lethal, and Jeff Jarrett.
Or Jay Lethal. I'm sure he's happy getting paid, but it's like he's one of those people. He deserves a lot more than he gets. Legitimately, Ring of Honor might be the only time you could ever say Lethal got exactly what he deserved. And it sucks, but, as long as he's happy doing what he's doing, that's all that matters, I guess.
I'm sure he wipes his tears away with those big paychecks every night.
Yes. So then we get a debut out of nowhere.
Indeed we do.
And the Super Destroyer. No, it's not him. We've seen him a few times. He's not debuting out of nowhere. Versus Terry Allen. Now, there might be some of you sitting there like, Terry Allen, I know that name. Why do I know that name? It's like one of those things where you're just like, okay, I know that name, but I don't know why I know that name. It's Magnum TA. And
as Watts noted, that in Florida, Allen was known as Magnum TA.
Oh, yeah. It's kind of funny. They introduced him as Magnum TA. His graphics says, they introduced him as Terry Allen. His graphics says Terry Allen. But they just call him Magnum TA basically the entire match. They mentioned that a good friend of Bill Watts, Dusty Rhodes, called and got him booked here. And Terry Allen looked good here. He hit an arm drag, and another arm drag, and another arm drag, and another arm drag, and a drop kick, and an arm drag, and another arm drag. Super Destroyer goes for the superplex. Allen blocks it and wins with an atomic drop. Now, this would be a bigger deal if A, Horner hadn't done the jobber win last week and followed it up with nothing this week, and B, Super Destroyer had any credibility on this show at all. Now, spoiler alert, they're going to follow up a lot better with Terry Allen than they did with Tim Horner this week. But, Terry Allen, 1-0.
Yeah, for the young people listening, there was a television show in the early 80s starring Tom Selleck that was called Magnum P.I. And because of a superficial resemblance with the big mustache, Terry Allen, that's why he was dubbed Magnum T.A.
And that's how Scott Hall became Magnum Scott Hall in the AWA.
Well, I'm noticing a lot of things because I spent, I'm a child of the Attitude Era, so I've spent most of my wrestling fandom listening to Jim Ross commentary in one way or another, and I'm just seeing so many things that JR obviously picked up from Watts. Like Watts dropped the "he's not quick, he's sudden" line here.
Mm-hmm. And Watts is definitely JR's mentor, and in a lot of ways that's great for JR, and in other ways, and we'll discuss this on Thursday, that comes back to bite JR in the ass. But we'll get to Thursday on Thursday. For now, let's stay on Tuesday. But big things ahead for Terry Allen. Nobody buy that man a motorcycle. So then we get the expiration of time match, El Gran Marcus versus Art Cruz. Yes, this is the actual El Gran Marcus, who was mentioned last month when somebody pretended to be him and called to get booked in Houston, which was just a weird excuse for a Rat Pack beatdown on Chavo Guerrero. Apparently, Marcus is mad at Tito and Chavo for being traitors to Mexico. I noted that Art Cruz got a 1 count, and Marcus didn't even bother kicking out. Cruz just rolled off of him. Cruz sent Marcus to the corner, and both men go for a backdrop at the same time, which would have painful results, except Marcus realized what was going on and pulled his head up before the head-on collision. They announced next week it's Mr. Wrestling 2 versus Mr. Olympia, Jim Duggan versus Super Destroyer, and I quote, a lot of great bouts next week. And also, Ted DiBiase will be on commentary. And Marcus hit Wasteland and a couple elbow drops for the win as the show went off the air.
Give Art Cruz credit for trying here.
Mm-hmm. This whole, and again, we're not watching the Houston show, and who knows what the Houston show even really is at this point, because Watts basically owns the Houston territory at this point. But, that was a weird-ass way to, in a roundabout way, have a horseman beatdown on Chavo Guerrero by promoting somebody who I don't even think was in the territory in a match, and then if one person bought a ticket to see that man wrestle, they were blatantly false advertising, knowing it wasn't going to happen, and led to just a random beatdown of poor Chavo Guerrero.
Speaking of blatantly false advertising mass luchadors, wasn't Mil Mascara supposed to be here this week?
Yes, he was. Now, it's possible, and I haven't watched next week's show yet, but it's possible he's on next week's, because this happens a lot where, because they tape 2 shows at the same time, they'll run down the list of people on quote-unquote next week's show, but it turns out it's they're at the next taping, which could mean they'll be here in 2 weeks. It's not nearly as bad as when they said one week that we were going to have a little person tag team match, and it got taped, and then for one reason or another, it kept being pushed back for for a month before they finally aired it. So as long as Bill Mascaras appears next week, it's far from our worst, most egregious thing on this show.
That's fair.
So overall, I would say this was mostly a good episode of Mid-South. We advanced some storyline. We've we've planted a seed for the Butch Reed heel turn. And the Duggan DiBiase feud continues. And I guess we'll find out in 2 weeks if DiBiase's hand injury is real or not.
Yeah, felt like we made some good narrative progress on this show.
And as we always say, these shows, especially if you're only used to 2024 wrestling, these shows can be boring because they're not going to have 15 angles in an hour. If you want that, TNA has the entire run of Impact from 2004 to 2013 on their TNA Plus app. Go check it out. But
I didn't enjoy it the first time.
Sadly, not a lot of people did. But we're going to move one state over from Louisiana to Texas and go to the Sportatorium for World Class, also May 28th, 1983. Let's go to the intro with the thankfully returning Bill Mercer.
Welcome to the Sportatorium in downtown Dallas, Texas, and World Class Championship Wrestling with the main event, a six-man tag team event featuring the Freebirds and Kevin Von Erich, the challenger. Kevin Von Erich and his brother David Von Erich in the role here of a disciplinarian at Sunshine. David Von Erich, Kevin Von Erich, and their partner, the Iceman, King Parsons. These three, Kevin, David, and King, teaming up against the six-man tag champions in a non-championship match, Michael Hayes, Buddy Roberts, and Terry Gordy. All this main event on World Class Championship Wrestling. I'm Bill Mercer. Nice to have you with us. We'll also have a captain's match emanating from this six-man tag team, and we'll show you the replay of the Kevin Von Erich Ric Flair World Championship match. Coming up next on World Class Championship Wrestling will be the Englishman, Chris Adams, and Johnny Mantell. Next.
I just realized looking at my notes for this show, that's the only audio I have listed to play. That 1 minute and 9 second bit. So it's up to us to entertain the people for the rest of this show by ourselves.
Oh dear.
Unless you have a timestamp that you noted that you'd want to play.
I only have one note about time, and it's not a stamp.
Okay, then. I wonder if it's about the first match, which, by the way, I want to note the main event, Freebirds versus Kevin and David Von Erich and Iceman Parsons in a non-title match, or as it's called, a non-championship match. By the way, they show highlights of each person while, Bill Mercer's talking about them. And David's highlight is him spanking Sunshine from last month.
Yes, it was.
Yes. Plus, we're going to have a captain's match, and it's the return of Taboo Tuesday, but we'll get to that later on. And a replay of Ric Flair versus Kevin Von Erich for the world title, and we'll get to that as well, but it's the same match that we already saw about 6 weeks ago at this point. That is leading to the world's greatest wrestling Star Wars, coming up in about 39 days. Now, by the way, I did look, and let me see if I noted that here. Okay, we'll get to it at the end. We'll talk about the world's greatest wrestling Star Wars at the end of the episode. Because I did look up to see, what, if anything, was airing on these TV shows and going from there.
I wonder if it's the same note that I have.
Quite possibly. Great minds do think alike sometimes. Or, whatever we are. So our first match, it is Gentleman Chris Adams versus Johnny Mantell. Now, Gentleman Chris Adams has been around for about a month, a little over a month. And other than some crappy promos, he hasn't done too badly for himself. He's mostly been on the winning side of things. He's had a feud with the Mongol. And so here we are with a nice, fun opener. And theoretically, getting him a nice, fun, quick, decisive win over Johnny Mantell. I did note here that Mercer's... Go ahead.
That was certainly what I expected.
Yes. Thankfully, Mercer's daughter is done graduating, so we have him back at commentary and Mark Lawrence back at ring introductions, which is where they both belong to be. I know eventually Mercer leaves when what's his name? Current Booker leaves to form Wild West Wrestling in like 87 and takes Lance Von Erich with him. And Mark Lawrence ends up as the lead announcer, but that is complaining for 4 years into the future. That's, But Mercer, by the way, does plug the world's greatest wrestling, Star Wars, which, based on the fact that 3 weeks ago we were told it was in about 60 days, it's now in about 39 days. But spoiler, it's a lot sooner than in about 39 days. The NWA, who apparently has this power, did announce that Hayes and Gordy will defend the American tag team titles on the show. Against who? We don't know yet. Maybe they'll tell us, maybe they won't. That's not important. Meanwhile, we were worried that Mantell may lose his arm thanks to Adams' use of an arm wringer. They exchanged holds for 8 minutes before Adams broke out a headstand into a head scissors takeover. Mantell did a small package that Bronco Lubitsch refused to count for some reason. Speaking of for some reason, Adams, who, like we mentioned, has been getting a healthy push since his debut, could not defeat Johnny Mantell, and we went to the alleged 10-minute time limit draw. Now, I'm going to have to go to you for the actual time, but looking at the timestamp on the bottom of the screen, I did not think this went the full 10 minutes.
We'll start by saying that I liked this match for the most part. Adams did some really cool stuff, some neat escapes, a couple of nifty little World of Sport style spots. I'm someone who has a very high appreciation for technical wrestling, so I enjoyed that. And I'm thinking, he's given Mantell a lot. They're having a nice little competitive TV match. I am one of those freaks who watches wrestling with a stopwatch just because I like to time matches. And I noticed that we got the 5-minute call at the 4-minute mark. And then we got a 10-minute time limit draw at 8 minutes and 44 seconds.
If it makes you feel better, I used to do that too. And I was a full-grown adult when I was doing it. Dave Meltzer allegedly doesn't use a stopwatch, but he still somehow times every match. So don't worry. You're in good company. Depending who you talk to.
The inner machinations of Dave Meltzer's mind are an enigma.
Indeed they are. I get into a fight with him once a year, and we haven't yet gotten into our annual fight, so I'm kind of avoiding talking to him because this is usually around the time that it happens. I think it has to do with the heat. It starts getting warmer, and Dave will say something that annoys me, so I'll point it out to him, and he'll get pissy with me, and we eventually hug and make up.
Tell you what, I live in Houston. I don't want to hear about the heat. It's getting nasty.
You have my sympathy. I will say, when you're used to getting all 4 seasons, these sharp differences do a number on you sometimes. So from here, they showed us the replay of the Ric Flair-Kevin Von Erich match from last month, where Kevin had the title won, but we got a dusty finish DQ because Kevin pitched Flair out of the ring, and Mercer uses it to plug the world title rematch at Reunion Arena at Star Wars. And thankfully, we did not get a replay of the incredibly biased David Manning interview, where he insisted that Kevin Von Erich should be the world champion, which all that did is make me say that if I was an opponent of one of the Von Erichs, I would go to court to make sure David Manning was not my referee.
Yeah, indeed.
Now, you were not joining us at the time. What did you think about this Flair-David Von Erich match? Because if I recall, I enjoyed it for the most part, even though David got the pin, Kevin got the pin, I knew he wasn't getting the title.
Here's what I wrote. Ref bump, Flair threw Kevin over the top rope. Another ref bump, Kevin threw Flair over the top rope. Dave Manning out to replace Bronco Lubitsch. Kevin hit a crossbody on the top rope and pinned Flair, but etc. And this is where I noted that over the top rope DQ rule is the stupidest rule in the history of wrestling. It was developed solely so lazy bookers could book fuck finishes, and I hate it.
The funny thing is, when done correctly, I think, it's a good rule, but unfortunately, most of the time it's not done correctly. And although I guess it's hard to say when would it be done correctly, because especially when you'd have things like, in WCW, who would have the rule, but they would just be flagrantly ignoring it whenever they felt like it. But I would say that sometimes it worked, especially if you have that desperation champion who's about to lose his title, just kind of near the ropes. Okay, sidesteps, throw the guy over the top rope, keep your belt. It's still a fuck finish. Yeah, it's still a fuck finish, but it's another fuck finish. Because, I mean, if they're not going to do that, they'll do one of 8,000 other fuck finishes. It's like, I don't know. It's like, it at least gives a little bit of variety, is my defense to it anyway. You know,
I just think if you're going to fuck somebody, you should be creative about it.
Well, not everything can be a 10-minute time limit draw in the opener, you know. But, so, you know how these shows all seem to be similar in certain ways? Well, up next, it was Taboo Tuesday all over again, because Iceman Parsons ended up taking on Buddy Roberts in the captain's match, but it's a match where the fans chose the participants. And Parsons literally asked the crowd to be chosen to face Buddy Roberts, as he vows to give the fans Buddy Roberts' hair after the match from 2 weeks ago, where Parsons had one of his braids cut off. And again, the manipulation does work. The fans, I was shocked. Not only did Parsons get more cheers than David Von Erich, David Von Erich didn't get any reaction at all. I don't know if you noticed that, but that was what I noted here.
There was some quality crowd manipulation.
Oh, yeah. And, Buddy beat Michael Hayes, because for some reason, it was a captain's match. We didn't bring all three members of both teams out. They only brought out two members. Who knows? Maybe we would have gotten Terry Gordy versus Kevin Von Erich, or maybe it wouldn't make sense to have the guy going for the world title in a few weeks get zero reaction to a mid-card babyface. But, hey, we'll go with whatever works, right?
Indeed.
So they did one of my favorite spots, and, it's one of those times where it's like you can have humor in wrestling and still be, good for business and just, good in general. Iceman is dragging Buddy around by his hair. Buddy throws himself over the top rope to break it up, so Parsons drags him back over the top rope by his hair and drops him face first on the mat. I thought that was hilarious. Iceman wins with she calls that the rear view, and goes for the scissors, but Buddy attacks. Parsons makes his comeback and cuts off some of Buddy's hair, and I wrote, seems obvious they're building up a hair versus hair match.
Buddy Roberts is great. There was very little of substance here, but also it was perfect because Buddy Roberts is just an amazing seller.
Buddy Roberts, and it's funny, I'm 39 years old, and pretty much my entire wrestling fandom that I was aware of Buddy Roberts, I was always underrating him. It's even as I'm watching back this now, I'm like, ugh, Buddy Roberts, the lesser of the three Freebirds, at least until we get Jimmy Garvin in there. But it's he's honestly amazing. And I think in a lot of ways, he doesn't get the due that he's deserved because, Michael Hayes gets all the love for what he does, and Gordy gets all the love for what he does. Buddy Roberts, in a lot of ways, doesn't get that same amount of love for being as great as he is.
Buddy Roberts is, and we've all known these people, Buddy Roberts is the guy who will start shit with everyone because he knows his big friend will kick your ass.
And they have a really good big friend there to be with. And speaking of the really good friend, Buddy Roberts goes to the back and comes right back out with his really big friend, Terry Gordy, and their medium-sized friend, Michael Hayes, as they go 3-on-3 with David and Kevin Von Erich and Iceman King Parsons. I honestly, because these shows, I can never really tell you, what show these are all taped, because the Mid-South stuff, that's pretty easy to find when each thing was taped. But World Class, while I could probably find it if I really looked for it, it's harder because it's just, I don't know, there's never that sense that we've ever left this building. Because at least with Mid-South, they'll say, come to our next TV taping on June 3rd or something. It's World Class is just whatever. So it's hard to say, oh yeah, this show took place on April 9th or something. But with that said, and the whole point why I'm bringing this up.
if I can interrupt for just a second.
Sure.
According to my research, this show as well as last week's show were taped May 17th.
Okay. So anyway, my laziness from not looking that up here, the whole point of this was to note that Roberts was still sweaty, so it was pretty obvious that these two matches in real life really were back-to-back like it's being shown here. Mercer talked about how David helped the Freebirds win the six-man tag team titles, which he did back on Christmas. And then, he gave up his part because, like he said, he wouldn't want to be champions without his brothers, and he doesn't feel like they should be champions without their brother, because I think Buddy Roberts wasn't there for some reason, because I know Hayes and Gordy were there because they were in the main angle. So I think for some reason Buddy Roberts wasn't involved. So David stepped in and won the tag team won the six-man tag titles with them, and then gave them the third belt instead of teaming with them. And then, of course, we had the big angle with Kerry and Flair. And so that's honestly like I love attention to detail like that. Just gonna say here.
Yeah.
So Mercer announces that the over-the-top rule, your favorite rule, is rescinded for the Kevin Flair title match. And also, if Flair is disqualified, he will lose the title. Spoiler alert, this will not matter. Just telling you.
It will not.
Don't know if you...
Something's going to happen.
Apparently you did. I was like, I don't know if you looked into the future yet, but this will not matter in the grand scheme of things. I want to point out, there were two fans at ringside with shirts, and one said Charlotte loves Terry Gordy, and the other said Sharon loves Michael Hayes. Now, before I saw the Sharon loves Michael Hayes shirt, I just thought these were two girls from Charlotte, North Carolina, who came for a visit, who were going to profess their love for the Freebirds. Nope, I'm pretty certain, based on context clues, Charlotte's the name of one of the girls. So,
Sharon's probably the name of the other one.
Or maybe it's the other way around. They're mocking each other.
Maybe.
So there was so much stalling as this match started that I thought Zbyszko was wrestling here, but he wasn't. Mercer announces that the Texas title is held up pending another match between David and Jimmy Garvin. We don't go into any more detail, and like we mentioned, there is a second show, which is it's considered the Fort Worth show because they're only aired in Fort Worth, go figure, where a lot of other angles take place that we just don't see and don't talk about. So we're going to assume that whatever happened there happened on that Fort Worth show that led to this title being held up. They got the heat on David, and Gordy began doing a war dance because we're trying to be as offensive to as many nationalities and oppressed groups as possible on this week's show. David took a nice flip bump off of a back elbow. Kevin got the hot tag, but Hayes had distracted David Manning, so he didn't see it. Parsons got the hot tag, and a six-way breaks out. The finish saw Buddy punch Parsons in the head, and Gordy pinned him. Now, I want to assume that Buddy Roberts had some sort of foreign object or something on his hand, but I didn't see it happen. All I saw was Gordy and Parsons running into the ropes. Gordy ducked, and Buddy knocked him the fuck out. So apparently Buddy is just a great puncher.
This is wrestling. A closed fist is illegal. That dastardly Buddy Roberts hit the man with a closed fist.
Very, very true. But, either way, it still knocked him the fuck out. And even though this is 1983, and for some reason all African-American wrestlers have a hard head, apparently Buddy's fist is harder than that.
So I noted here 2 weeks into my viewing, Mid-South TV, just squash, squash, squash. World-class TV, a few squashes, but an actual substantial main event.
Oh, yeah. And, Mid-South, a lot of weeks will have, a main event of substance, but it goes in the middle of the show, so you're going to end the show with your expiration of time jobber match, which sometimes makes you forget that, hey, I just watched a great, competitive match earlier. Although they rarely go longer than like 5 or 6 minutes, but, whatever.
So you remember when I noted on Mid-South that Tim Horner and Mr. Olympia were wearing the same color trunks?
Yes, you did.
Kevin was wearing the same color red trunks and knee pads as the Freebirds. It's really funny to me that that happened on both of these shows. These wrestlers need to do like you women do before a party and call each other and make sure you're not wearing the same thing.
I mean, I guess you could argue that, hey, if they were to do that, that would be proof that wrestling is fake because, it's very possible that, a babyface and a heel could just coincidentally be wearing the exact same colored tights and boots to the ring. It seems kind of ridiculous, but,
So I think this might be the first David Von Erich match I've ever seen.
Interesting.
And I've always heard that he was like the best wrestler of the boys, but and granted he mostly did just sell the whole match, but I didn't see anything that made me think he was better than Kevin.
To be honest, I mean, now I'm trying to think, other than like the Jim Garvin match, we haven't seen a lot of David singles matches. Like we've seen a lot more Kevin, because of course Kevin's going for the world title. But I'm sure, we'll get more David in situations the show is, individual skill. But yeah, Kevin, like, it's easy to just say, oh, David was the best, but like Kevin was really good and Kerry was really good. You know, Lance, of course, was the best Von Erich, but he wasn't really a Von Erich.
Yeah, the way I always heard it was Kevin was the real athletic one, and David was the best worker, and Kerry was the pretty one. Which Kerry Von Erich is very pretty. That part is true.
Yes. And here's another plug for the Iron Claw, now on Max, where you can see things.
You gotta watch that.
Well, on that movie, remember, you can see things like Kerry Von Erich becoming a wrestler after Fritz watched Starrcade 83 at his house, walked outside, and told Kerry it's time to get into wrestling.
Well, that explains why I haven't seen Kerry yet. He's not in the business for another 7 months.
Yes, just ignore everything else that you know. So
I thought it was ironic that the Iceman got the hot tag.
Yes, it would have been Kevin, but that damn David Von Erich that damn David Manning was distracted. Michael Hayes was probably pointing out how biased he was, so David had to prove that he wasn't biased and not just let the Von Erichs do whatever the hell they wanted. But speaking of David and speaking of Kerry, they're both in matches next week. David versus Jim Garvin for the Texas title, and Kerry versus Michael Hayes. So you're going to get a chance to see both of your Von Erichs in singles matches. So
not the one I want to see.
So we had a lot of build to Star Wars without any promos at all this week. So our review probably went absurdly fast, like faster than a 10-minute time limit draw fast. Ultimately, though, I would say it was a fun show. Buddy Roberts stole the show, in my not so humble opinion. And we're on the road to Star Wars. And this is a Star Wars I actually want to see, and I'm going to see. Now, I did look into the future here. I noted that Star Wars is on June 17th, and they will air some matches on June 25th and July 2nd. So I, look and see what you think. But, I say we, watch half of Star Wars on the 25th and the other half on July 2nd. If you don't want to, that's fine.
For me.
Okay.
I was just trying to figure out, is that, so that's next week?
No, that's that's in a few weeks. Because we still have the 4th, the 11th, and the 18th. Because the 18th, even though it's technically the day after Star Wars, the 18th is still going to be, a regular wrestling show, regular 1-hour show here. So that's going to do it here. Now, did you have anything to say here as we wrap things up for this week?
Not really. As we don't want to spoil it and talk about what's going to happen on June the 10th that throws us into disarray.
Very, very true. And it's kind of funny because I knew this happened, but I forgot that it happened. until I looked ahead to see what the card was on the show and then compared to what's listed on Peacock, at least for those 2 episodes of World Class. So when I saw it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. But that should be interesting. I wonder, like, because when you said it was June 10th?
Yeah, St. Louis.
Okay. Yeah, so I'd imagine they would have to mention on this show, although, let me see. So the shows are the 4th, the 11th, and the 18th. So technically, I mean, I guess if they know it's going to happen, they could announce it and tape it for the June 11th show. But I think there's a very good chance that technically the big news doesn't get talked about until after the show actually happens.
So we're not going to say what's going to happen, but I'll give you a hint. Starcade 83 is going to be on the horizon, and things are going to start moving into that direction.
Yes, and we'll just leave it at that. So, because last week I was a dick, I didn't bother to ask you this. Trae, do you care to plug anything you're working on, or your social media, or anything like that before we wrap things up?
Yeah, if you want to read my dumb wrestling takes, I'm on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Oregatrae, Oregatrae. One of those names that I think is a funny pun that's hard to spell, or that I have to spell out for it to make sense. So yeah.
As someone who named themselves Arya, no shame in your game, man. No shame in your game.
Well, it's Akira Taue had the finisher that's Oregatawe, and Oregatrae. It's I am Trae.
Okay. I gotta say, it's funny because when I was a kid, I'd get all the PWI magazines, and like I didn't have Dave Meltzer next to me, reading me these names or anything. So I was like, I had no idea how to pronounce half of these names. Like Akira Taue, Mitsuharu Masawa, hell, I think I fucked up Jumbo Tsuruta, and that one's pretty obvious. It's like,
funnily enough, I did not know how to pronounce Akira Taue's name until Mitsuharu Masawa died, and I heard Dave say it on a radio show.
I'll do it, I guess. Yeah, my wrestling world changed when I started reading PWI. I'm like, oh, there's wrestling in other countries? Go figure, right?
Indeed.
You would think I would have figured that out since, by this point, Masachono was the NWA champion on WCW television and all that fun, happy shit. But hey, who needs common sense when you're 7 or 8 years old? But
I don't need it now.
Yeah. So that's going to do it for this week. Trae, I'm not going to talk to you again for 24 hours. So I hope the rest of your Wednesday goes really well.
I assume that I'm going to be excited to watch Dynamite.
Light the fuse. Light the fuse. It's Dynamite. All right. I don't even know if that's still a theme song. But whether or not it is, who knows? Watch Dynamite tonight and find out. But thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you again in 7 days.